Good day. Welcome to the 53rd episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. Today I'm going to talk about Venezuela, but before I do that, I want to discuss two short other topics. A dear friend of mine, Aude Chesnev from France, posed two questions about my last podcast about Western Asia, Palestine. I want to tell you something about my journey to Iran 2 months ago, and then I go to the main topic, the elections in Venezuela. Old asked me two questions. How can you bring DTM to people who are so brainwashed? And why is a peaceful resolution of the occupation of Palestine impossible? Why not a wider coalition to force Israel to accept the two-state coalition solution? Now, in general, how do people change their mind? One is through arguments. If that's the case, right, then you can have a discussion with people and exchange arguments. But people, some people base their opinions on arguments, other change their opinions by experience and confrontation with reality. That is what make them change their mind. And the confrontation with reality is based on the change in power relations. We see now in the West that the controlling of the mind through the media, through authority, is diminishing. That's why you see people going to social media looking for alternative knowledge, alternative authority. This is a loss of authority in the mainstream media. And then the question is, in the global north, they look for this alternative in different ways. A small section going to the extremist sides, extreme right. But at the end of the day, arguments count, so we use arguments, but that's not the only thing that counts in when people change their mind. Could be, as I mentioned, the reality of things. Now, is a peaceful solution of a two-state solution, is it possible in a peaceful way? I argued that I don't think so. Why? Because there was in accord 30 years ago, 1993, the Oslo Accords, that talked about the two-state solution, but it wasn't supported by actions, nor by the Zionists who were in the lead, nor the West who followed them. So from the start, the concept of the two-state was wrong because it wasn't based on sovereignty of the Palestinian state, but on the submission of the Palestinian state to the control of the Zionist state. The Zionist state should control the Palestinian state militarily, economically, and culturally. That doesn't work. So respecting a sovereign Palestinian state was never in the minds of Israel or the West. They always looked for ways to control the Palestinian state, and now they did it through the PLO. So their only avenue is how to break the resistance, and the PLO acts as an extension of the Zionist control, and they hope that bringing the Arab states through the Abraham Accords to develop Palestine economically, that the Palestinians will forget their occupation. It didn't go that way. So the peaceful resolution is impossible because of the Zionist occupation is established and maintained by brutal force, and it won't end the occupation by peaceful means. They want a final defeat of the resistance, and they are supported by the West in this tragedy. Now, another important thing that happened last week was the China Beijing Declaration, where 14 Palestinians factions decided to come together, work towards unity, recognize PLO as the legitimate representation of the Palestinian people, and even talked about the two-state solution, at least by the Chinese. So I need more time to develop the analysis of the Beijing agreement, and I'll do that the next time. Now, the other thing which I did last week is I visited 2 months ago. I visited Iran in May. It was a life-changing experience, and because I just didn't just visit a country, I visited a revolution, and it was the third revolution I visited in my life after the Grenadian and Bolivarian Revolution. And I wrote an essay about this experience, which I've published on www.sunderhero.com. If you go to the menu item articles, you will find it there. So let me go to Venezuela. I'll try to put the elections, the presidential elections of 2024, in a historic perspective. So I'll go into the history of the Bolivarian Revolution, the electoral history of it, and then assess the significance of the outcome of the 2024 presidential elections. Now, in 1977, Hugo Chavez founded the Revolutionary Bolivian Army. And after years of planning and organization, they attempted a military takeover of the government in 1992. It failed, and it resulted in Chavez and his companion being imprisoned. However, this event serves as a catalyst for his popularity, as the Venezuelan people came to view Chavez as a champion against the country's corrupt ruling class. So in 1994, he got amnesty from the new government, which was ruled by a rightish president, but who had made alliances with some leftist parties. So in 1994, he gave amnesty to Chavez. And in 1997, Chavez formed a political party, the Fifth Republican Movement, to contest the presidential elections. And with the backing of other leftist parties, Chavez won the election with 57% of the vote. So in February 1990, he was inaugurated as president of Venezuela, and that marked the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution, which would have an enormous impact in Latin America. Now, in the same year, Chavez held a referendum for a constituent assembly to draft a new constitution. The referendum received 82% in favor, and in July 1919, election was held to elect 130 deputies to the Constituent Assembly. And Chavez's party secured 95% of the seats, and the Assembly drafted a new constitution, which was subsequently submitted to a referendum in 1999, and it got an approval of 72% of the voters. Now, the new constitutions officially changed the name of the country from the Republic of Venezuela to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The old constitution was based on a three-branch system of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The new constitution introduced a five-branch system: the executive branch, the president; the legislative branch, the National Assembly; the judicial branch, the courts; the electoral branch, which is the Natural Electoral Council; and the citizens branch, which is composed of the defender of the people, chief public prosecutor, and the comptroller general, who is responsible for defending citizen states. The Constitution enshrined the idea of popular sovereignty through frequent referendums. It also emphasized social responsibilities, the right to rebel against injustice, and the internal independence of the Republic for foreign domination. The Constitution enshrined certain human rights, such as free education up to tertiary level, free healthcare, access to a clean environment, and the rights of minorities, including indigenous people, to uphold their own cultures, religions, and languages. It increased the presidential term from 5 to 6 years. It established a presidential recall referendum, allowing the people to remove a president before his or her term ended. Now, let's go into the electoral history in Venezuela. Venezuela is a federal republic. There have been 30 elections in the past 25 years. 2 for Constituent Assembly, 4 for mayors, 4 for parliament, 4 for president, 2 referendums, 5 for governments, and 1 mega election in 2000, which is the renewal of every post after the approval of the constitutions. The Chavistas won 28 of the 30 elections, but this doesn't negate the fact that the opposition has secured some posts. In 2013, the Chavistas won 255 municipalities, with the opposition winning 75. In 2021, the opposition secured victories in 5 gubernatorial races. All of these victories were recognized by the government. So, Chavez won the elections in 1998 with 56%, with a turnout of 33%. 2006, he increased his vote with 63% with a turnout of 75%. And 6 years later, he declined in vote, 55%, 7% decline, and a turnout of 80%. 2013, Maduro won with 50%, Chavez died, and a year later there were elections with a turnout of 80%. And 2018, Maduro had 68% with a turnout of 46%, but the opposition boycotted this election. I'll go into the presidential elections later on. What is very important is the 2015 parliamentary elections, because the Chavistas suffered a defeat. This opened the door for a US orchestrated coup d'etat involving Juan Guaido, the then president of the National Assembly. Guaido contended that the 2018 presidential elections, 3 years after the parliamentary elections, that they were rigged and declared Maduro illegitimate. And despite lacking a presidential mandate, he asserted his own claim to the presidency, backed by a majority in the parliament. So on January 23, he declared himself as acting president and took a presidential oath at a rally in Caracas. The US and its allies formally recognized him as president. This bizarre demonstration of abuse of power enabled the US and Europe to seize Venezuelan assets abroad, and a crippling economic boycott resulted in empty shelves and food rationing. So there was an economic coup. In 2019, the Trump government signed off an order for Guaido to control the holdings of Venezuela in the Federal Reserve Banks of New York and Federal Insurance Banks. This blocked 70 billion in assets and resulted in an 11 billion loss of revenues. In October 22, a judge in the US began the auction of the shares of Citgo. Citgo is a company which sells oil in the US, and it's owned by Venezuela State Oil Company. And so they just took out the valuation of Citgo, which is 13 billion, and start selling those accounts. And Guaido and his people got very rich in this. They stole a lot of money. In July 22, a London High Court ruled in favor of Guaido in a battle for the control of gold reserves in the Bank of England. Venezuela had gold reserves in the Bank of England for $2 billion US, and Guaido got control of it. So it lasted 5 years, this parliament. The new parliamentary elections was in 2022. The number of seats were expanded with 110 from 167 to 277 deputies. The opposition parties boycotted the election. The turnout was 35% low. but the Shafistas got 62%, which is 253 of the 274. So the boycott failed. Guaido fled in April 2023 to the United States because obviously, he committed a lot of crimes. The Maduro administration, the prosecutors charged him with money laundering, treason, usurping public functions, and they issued an arrest warrant and asked the international community to cooperate with the arrest of Guaido. So he fled in April 2023 in the United States. So the boycott policy led to a loss of power of the opposition. They were not able to defeat the Bolivarian revolution solely through economic boycott. So the new strategy was participate in the election, but cry out in advance that if they lose, it is fraud. And the opposition is led by somebody from the extreme right. It's an amazing thing in Venezuela. In France you have Marine Le Pen, a woman. In Italy you have a woman, and now in Venezuela you have a woman that leads the extreme right. Her name is Maria Corina Machado, and she was barred from participating in the elections because of treason and corruption. What happened? She supported international sanctions during the Venezuelan crisis. She advocated for foreign interventions inside Venezuela. In 2002, there was a coup against Chavez, and she signed the Carmona Decree, which is the decree that the coup people had signed out that said that they established a transitional government, they dissolved the National Assembly and the Supreme Court, they suspended the Attorney General, the Controller General, governors and mayors elected during Chavez's administration. The coup failed, but she signed that decree and she called for a military intervention as a member of parliament, and that is illegal in Venezuela. So she was barred because of treason and corruption. Now, when they cry of fraud of the voting system in Venezuela, it's important to understand how the system works. This is one of the most secured system in the world. It combines electronic voting with physical voting. It works like this. There's a machine in all the polling stations. And when a person goes to the poll, they need their identity card. And when they apply for an identity card, they have to put down the fingerprint. So the fingerprint and the identity number is in the central database of the National Election Council. The machine checks the identity based on the identity number. So the identity number is put there, and then the screen shows the fingerprint, and then they compare the fingerprint and the name, obviously, and the photo of the person who comes with the voting card. And when it's confirmed, the person puts a fingerprint at the list, at the sheet where his name is. The machine checks the fingerprint, and then they go to a closed space, a box. There's a screen there. Nobody can see what you vote because you close it. And the screen shows you a list of the names of the candidates for presidency, the party, and a photo of the candidate. So you touch on the screen your option, then there's a pop-up window that gets the button vote. So now if you assert that this is the correct person, you press the vote button, and then the machine says you voted successfully, and it produces a piece of paper with the results of your vote. So now you have a piece of paper in your hand, and you check the paper, and obviously it is the same always as you have voted. You fold the paper, you go out of your box and put the paper inside the box. So you vote in a machine, but at the same time the print gives you a physical paper which you put in a box as if you have manually voted. And the paper assures that you voted the way you wanted. Now, Then you go uh, to the commission. There's a commission there, and each polling stations, the National Council selects randomly a president and three or four secretaries that manage the polling stations. It's done at random. It's not done by party. But in addition to that, every party can name an official to witness that poll. So the opposition, in every poll, they can put somebody to witness the whole process. So so you go to the commission where you're listed after you voted, and then you put your fingerprint again on the list with your name, saying now the second finger you have voted. You leave the place at 1800 hours, 6 o'clock. The polling station closes unless there are people in the queue. Then they have to make sure that all these people vote. So 2 months before the whole elections, the National Election Councils invites every party to send a witness to witness the whole voting process, from checking the fingerprints to the transmission of data to the National Council. So they sign an agreement, each member of the party, to assert, yes, this worked correctly. The machine correctly recognizes the fingerprints, the data transmission has gone correctly. Though they control the whole process, organization, and technical results. The far right, all the opposition parties signed except the far right party supporting this extreme right woman, Machado. Now, so everybody agrees the system works correctly. Once the polling system closes, then the data are electronically transmitted to the national center. The machine prints a list with the name of the candidate and the number of votes they have got. And now the commission, in the presence of all party representative, opens at random a box with the physical papers of the vote and count that in front of everybody present, including the witness of other parties. In all elections, there was never a discrepancy. The percentage of box opened normally when you do a survey and you want to check representatives, you take maybe a 2% margin for statistical control. But in Venezuela, they check 50% of the boxes. And every time in all the elections, there were 30 elections, there was never a discrepancy. So the system works. And then based on their data, the national councils can announce the results that are irreversible. In the case of the last election, 2024, they did that based on 80% of the votes. And they have done it in all the elections, and when 100% of the votes were counted, it was the same as the 80%. So the opposition say, the extreme right opposition, when they say they don't acknowledge the result of the system, then you might imagine that they won't acknowledge the result if they win, because they have won some elections. Not the presidential election, but they have won the parliamentary election, they have won elections in the different states for governors. So then they say, okay, we acknowledge that the system works, but if we lose, we don't acknowledge this. That's the hypocrisy of the opposition. Now, the 2024 elections was about consolidating the revolution or a new stage of confrontation with violence and the invitations for military intervention against the army. If the opposition had won, that is what would have been done. You see, they would come in and they need to dismantle the police, secret service, military apparatus. And in order to do that, they would have to invite foreign forces to do that. So it's a dangerous election. Now, let me give you an analysis of the results of the elections. And I don't look at the percentage of votes that presidents got and the candidates got, because that doesn't tell you the exact picture. Because in 1998, Chavez got 56%. 2006, he increased with more than 6% to 62%. 2012, he fell with 7% to 55%, still a majority. And then he died. And in 2013, there were new elections, and Nicolas Maduro, got 50.6%. Some very slim majority. Then in 2018, the opposition boycotted the elections, the main opposition party. So it's not one opposition party. There are a lot, and some of them participate in elections and others don't. And then the percentage of votes that Maduro got went from 50 to 68%. You would say 18% vote, 80%. It's a great victory, but it isn't if you look at the absolute number. And then now he got 51% of the votes, while the opposition got 44%. So let's leave the percentage. Let's look at the absolute number. So you see that the electorate of Venezuela, obviously the population has grown, the electorate has grown, but the boycott of the 2018 elections led to a decline, normally about 14 million people on the population of 30 million votes. In 2019, because of the boycott, 9 million voted, 5 million didn't vote. And in 2013, Maduro got 7.6 million votes. 2018, he got 6.2 million votes, 6.3 million votes. The opposition in 2013 had 7.3 million votes, 200,000 votes less than Maduro. So Venezuela has a very strong opposition. Remember that the electoral victories of the Chavistas is not guaranteed at all. You know, the opposition is still very strong, but yet there is a stable electorate for the Chavistas. In 2013, they had 7.5 million votes. In 2018, 6.3 million votes. It went down. And with 60% of the vote counted, they had 5 million. But if you calculate a 100% vote, it would be 6.4 million, meaning that Maduro went up about 200,000 votes compared to the 2018 elections. And the opposition got 4.4 million based on 80%, but based on 100%, 5.6 million votes. So 6.4 million for Maduro, 5.5 million, 5.6 million for the opposition. So Chavistas have a very strong popular base, but so does the opposition. There are not 5 to 6 million rich people in Venezuela. So a lot of poor people are manipulated in their mind and vote for the opposition. The opposition saw that the strategy of boycott will never work. So I guess in the future, looking at the results, they see it's about controlling the mind of the people. And if they can do that, combined with economic boycott, combined with, sowing of hatred, they might win in the future. So the Sufistas cannot take their popular support for granted. But for now, they have won, and they have another 6 years to make sure, that they can increase the base, social base, and decolonizing the minds of the people will be an important aspect of this. Thank you, and hope to see you next week.